Hello folks, as predicted, Nepal have been back in touch with us all just a few days before the upcoming update to address some of the previous changes, clear up some of the more recent information, and to give us a sneak peek into what's coming down the pipeline. The latter half of this video is packed with more details than the former, however, we are going from top to bottom, so let's start making our way to the good stuff and not waste any time. Hello Berserkers, this is your Commander-in-Chief, Sir Jun-Ho Lee, Creative Director of the first Berserker Khazan. Before we dive into the details of what's coming, I'd like to address something many of you have been curious about, which would be the recent difficulty rework. Why did we change the difficulty names? At launch, we set our intended standard experience as normal and added a more accessible option labeled easy. We figured that if players found the game too difficult, they'd simply switch down to easy, but when we looked at the data, we saw that many players just quit the game without ever changing the difficulty. When we asked why, a lot of people said, I'd rather quit with dignity than drop it down to easy. Some also said that if the default had been called hard instead, they would have felt okay about switching down to normal. Difficulty is subjective and each player experiences Khazan's challenges differently. That's why we offered multiple difficulty options from the start. We wanted more people to enjoy Khazan and we thought it would be better to let players freely adjust the challenge. We thought it was up to the player to lower it if it's too hard or raise it if it's too easy. This is one of the biggest lessons I've learned from all of you, so we changed the difficulty names to give players more flexibility. The old easy is now called normal, and the old normal is now called challenge. And we also changed the default starting difficulty to normal. Next, why did we add a beginner difficulty? Many players recommended Khazan as a good entry point into hardcore action or Souls-like games, especially since it had an easy mode. But at the same time, we also heard a lot of players' feedback saying, sure, there is an easy mode, but it's the hardest easy mode I've ever played. One of Khazan's strengths is that it offers selectable difficulty levels as a hardcore action game, so we wanted to expand that range and make it a game we could confidently recommend as a true starting point. To that end, we didn't just adjust combat parameters, we also added quality of life features, like enemy outlines when out of combat, so it's easier to recognize targets and engage at your own pace. With this beginner difficulty, I hope more players can jump into Khazan without feeling pressured and, once they build confidence, take on the challenge of normal or challenge difficulty. And then finally, why did we add a hardcore difficulty? The truth is, Khazan's current difficulty has already been significantly toned down through extensive testing and polishing, but for those who have already completed Khazan's challenging journey, we wanted to bring back that raw, intense thrill we originally envisioned. During development, the early boss prototypes were brutally difficult, and we even considered compiling them into a separate game mode. Unfortunately, aside from the difficulty, those early visions weren't polished enough to be released. Instead, we created a new difficulty setting with a set of strict limitations designed to capture the same primal thrill. While testing, we thought maybe this is a bit too much, so we added an attack damage bonus to soften the blow, but to our surprise, many of you cleared it more easily than expected. So for this patch, we're rolling it out in its pure form, exactly as we originally envisioned it. We're also preparing improvements to address some of the inconveniences tied to the camera that's exclusive to this mode, and based on many of your requests, we've also added to our to-do list the option to use the hardcore camera in other difficulties. Now, let's get into the details of the June 27th update. This is probably what you've all been waiting for. The Khazan female DLC will be available for free to everyone, and players who log in online by 4:29 PM on June 26th will receive the Pathfinder pack as a bonus. The exhaustion durations have been extended for early bosses Yatuga, Blade Phantom, and Viper. Exhaustion is one of the core mechanics of combat. Enemies in an exhausted state take additional damage and can't put up a fight, giving you a window to unleash free attacks, including the powerful brutal attack. But we came to see that since players are still getting used to the game when they're fighting these early bosses, the exhaustion window for early bosses may be too short, so we have increased it a little bit. We did go back and forth on this quite a bit because this could technically be seen as a boss nerf, but ultimately we felt it was important to give players a bit more time to engage with and learn the exhaustion mechanic whilst early on. For combo guide improvements, we've added tutorial guides to Storm Pass that introduce each weapon's mechanics and basic combos during their respective trials. These guides are designed to help new players quickly understand each weapon's unique features, try them out, and use simple combos right away. For sprint stamina cost reduction, we found that adjusting sprint stamina cost in higher difficulties didn't actually make the game more challenging, it just made it more frustrating. To deal with this aspect of the challenge, we've lowered the sprint stamina cost in both challenge and hardcore difficulties to match the normal setting. We also considered removing the cost entirely, but we'll need a bit more time to make that call. For the spirit of advocacy requirement lowered, we heard a lot of feedback that required a lacrima of circulation to some of the spirit of advocacy, often disrupted boss progression, and I completely agree. After careful consideration and multiple internal discussions, we finally decided to remove this requirement. Augment gear requirement lowered and dungeon shop hound purchase limit removed. We received a lot of feedback on the augment gear system. As I've mentioned several times on Discord, we do believe this system needs a fundamental improvement, but since that kind of change would require large scale development, we've made some interim adjustments to address the immediate inconvenience. Starting with this patch, inherited gear will receive a fixed level increase based on the grade of the material gear. Legendary is +5, epic is +4, unique is +3, and so on. We've also removed the one-time purchase limit on dungeon shop rewards, allowing you to buy them repeatedly without restrictions. For the ultimate challenge reward improvements, we've enhanced the performance of the set items obtainable through Great General's Crucible and Berserker's Bloodshed. Rewards earned from Great General's Crucible will also be upgraded from epic to legendary tier, and we've increased the drop rates for consumable crafting materials so you can gather more resources more easily. Whilst not part of this patch, this is a quick preview of what we're working on behind the scenes. For the gear tier upgrade system, for example, you'll be able to adjust epic gear to legendary. For the weapon value scaling adjustment system, B and C weapon scaling values will be adjusted or upgradable. Chance to obtain certain items upon dismantling gear. It has a chance to give you set crafting materials or grade upgrade items. And finally, we also have lacrima of circulation sales. It might seem like a simple change, but replacing the existing item data within inventories will take a bit of work. We're also working to improve some of the more tedious or frustrating sections in level-based gameplay and looking to make leveling feel more rewarding overall. And now for an important announcement. The first Berserker Khazan extended original game soundtrack will be released at 3 AM on June 27th UTC. It features 33 handpicked tracks in addition to the original launch OST and will be available on Neeple's YouTube channel and on other music platforms. We do hope everything we've prepared brings even more enjoyment to all you Berserkers out there. Thank you truly for your unwavering love and support for Khazan. Sincerely, Commander-in-Chief, Sir Jun-Ho Lee. So that was a fair bit to cover, folks. Nothing major, but many smaller changes made across the board that will further shape Khazan's overall experience. Some of these changes, such as the augment gear and ultimate challenge reward adjustments, should be well received across the board, as many of the recent issues raised by players have been regarding these mechanics and game modes. However, what I'm personally anticipating the most would be this section right here. Beginning with the gear tier upgrade system, I first assumed this was regarding an additional gear grade being added into Khazan. However, the wording here suggests that it is simply a new mechanic that will allow us to upgrade the rarity of our current gear and not just its level. This changes things quite a bit, to be honest, as oftentimes you will receive the gear piece you want from a boss, but it's also a lower gear rarity than what you would want to use, thus making it irrelevant. This does solve that issue, and whilst not as good as additional gear grades being added, it is still a much welcome addition. We also once again have the mention of weapon scaling with slightly more details given. It does of course say here that B and C weapon scaling values will be adjustable or upgradable. Now, there's not a great deal to go off from this. However, at the very least, we can expect some more diversity between weapons now, and hopefully this will allow for more flexibility and refinement within builds. Of course, these changes and the others mentioned will not be arriving with the update in just a few days. Instead, I anticipate they will be included within the next update instead, which, if I were to hazard a guess, I'd say it will be here roughly mid next month. But of course, as always, we will just have to wait and see. Anyway, not the biggest of announcements, but once again, Neeple have absolutely delivered above and beyond expectations. It's becoming somewhat of a trend that they will sneak in additional changes and quality of life with each new update, regardless of whether they've hinted at working on those changes or not. With this in mind, it does make each new update a little bit more exciting, and personally, I'm having an absolute blast doing this job, folks. I never expected this amount of updates in such a short amount of time, nor did I expect to have so many secrets or surprises to consistently be reported on. It certainly made this role much easier, and naturally I do have a soft spot for Khazan and Neeple's treatment of him overall. I have said it before, but just to reiterate, I am absolutely going nowhere, folks. As this channel has begun to shape into somewhat of a Souls-like / action RPG hub, I've decided to lean into the genre a little bit more moving forward. This time next month, we will of course have Wuchang Fallen Feathers releasing, and I am absolutely intending to insert her into the channel in a similar fashion to how we followed Khazan over the past 3 months, but again, we will just have to wait and see. Anyway, I'll be back in a few days to cover the update's official patch notes. I'm working on multiple different Khazan videos currently, both news and guide videos alike, so do keep an eye out for plenty more in the very near future. I do of course have a range of guides and news videos on the channel already, folks, so do feel free to stop on by and check things out. Otherwise, thanks for watching, folks, and until next time, peace.